My name is Wendy Dixon, and I'm 29 years old. Last month at my parents' 35th wedding anniversary dinner. White tablecloths, Veuve Clicquot, 30 family members packed into a private dining room in Back Bay. My dad stood up, tapped his champagne glass, and announced that the entire family was going to Maui for a week. Everybody cheered. My mom squeezed his arm. My sister Megan hugged her husband. Cousins clinked glasses. And I smiled, because for once, it felt like I belonged at the table instead of just serving it. Then I asked a simple question. What time is the departure? My dad looked at me the way you'd look at a coat rack that suddenly started talking. You don't know because you're not coming, he said. Someone needs to stay behind and take care of all the kids. 30 people, 30 faces staring at me, and not a single one objected. But my dad didn't know that I'd been preparing. Not for that moment specifically, but for the moment, I'd finally have a reason to leave. Before I tell you what happened next, if this kind of story speaks to you, take a second to hit like and subscribe, but only if you mean it, and drop a comment with where you're watching from and your local time. I read every one. Now, to understand how a single sentence unraveled everything, I need to take you back to where it started. The Dixon family lived in a colonial-style house on a tree-lined street in Brookline, Massachusetts. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, granite countertops in the kitchen. The kind of house that looks like a magazine cover in October when the leaves turn. My dad, Gerald, retired early at 58 from his regional sales manager position. My mom, Patricia, had been a homemaker her entire adult life and filled her retirement years with a book club and Tuesday yoga. Together, they projected the image of an upper-middle-class family that had everything figured out. My sister Megan was the proof. 33, senior accountant at a Big Four firm, married to Bradley Hale, a software engineer with a calm face and a talent for never saying anything controversial. They lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Newton with their 3 kids, Olivia, 7, Jack, 5, Lily, 3. Megan drove a white Audi Q5. Bradley drove a Tesla Model 3. Their nursery was Pottery Barn from floor to ceiling. And then there was me. I lived in a studio apartment in Alston, 400 square feet, street noise, a radiator that clanked at 3 a.m. I worked as an administrative assistant at a small insurance brokerage downtown. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked rear-view mirror I kept meaning to fix. Every Sunday, the family gathered for dinner at the Brookline house. Patricia cooked. Gerald held court at the head of the table. Megan sat to his right, Bradley beside her. The kids in high chairs and booster seats clustered around their mother. My seat was at the far end, closest to the kitchen. Because someone always needed more water, more napkins, another roll. I'd been sitting there for 7 years, and I'd never once questioned it. That was just where I belonged. Let me walk you through a typical week. Every Saturday, I drove 40 minutes from Alston to Newton to watch Olivia, Jack, and Lily. 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. 8 hours. Megan and Bradley needed couple time. Brunch, errands, sometimes just sitting in a quiet house. I fed the kids, cleaned up after them, broke up fights, bandaged scraped knees, read the same picture book 11 times in a row. No one ever offered to pay me. The one time I hinted at it, casually, over Sunday dinner, Megan laughed. Family helps family, Wendy. It's not a job. It felt like a job. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday party for Olivia or Jack or Lily. I was the one who set up, blew up balloons, arranged place settings, prepped the appetizers while Patricia took credit. I planned everything, she'd tell the aunts and uncles. I'd be in the kitchen, elbow deep in dish soap, and I'd hear her through the wall. 2 years ago, my dad retired. Patricia asked me to organize the party. I booked the restaurant, designed the invitations, curated the playlist, coordinated RSVPs for 40 guests. The night of, Gerald stood up and thanked my beautiful wife, Patricia, for putting this all together. Patricia smiled. I refilled the bread basket. Megan never said thank you. Her version of gratitude was advice. It's good practice, she told me once, watching me wrestle Lily into a car seat. For when you have your own kids. She said it like she was doing me a favor. After those Saturdays, I'd drive back to Alston in the dark, microwave something for dinner, and sit on my bed with my laptop. That's when the real part of my day began. But I'll get to that. 4 years ago, I bought a camera off Craigslist. A Canon Rebel T6, secondhand, $350 with a kit lens. The seller was a college kid upgrading to something nicer. I remember holding it in my apartment and feeling a click that had nothing to do with the shutter. Something inside me just aligned. I started shooting weekends. The Charles River at dawn, scaffolding shadows on Newbury Street. The way light hit the T-station stairs at rush hour. It was nothing serious at first, just me and the camera and the city at odd hours. Then about 2 years ago, I started getting paid. Small gigs, product photos for Etsy shops, menu shots for a cafe in Somerville, headshots for a friend's LinkedIn, $200 to $500 a project. Not life-changing money, but mine. I opened a separate savings account and funneled every dollar into it. One Sunday dinner, I mentioned the freelance work. I thought maybe someone would ask to see what I'd been shooting. My dad set down his fork. Photography? That's a hobby, Wendy. You can't build a life on hobbies. Megan didn't look up from her phone. Photography isn't exactly a 401k. My mom said nothing. She just changed the subject to Megan's upcoming performance review. I nodded. I cleared the plates, I loaded the dishwasher, and I kept shooting. I didn't stop because they dismissed it. I stopped showing them. I stopped texting links to my work, stopped hoping someone would notice the photo I'd gotten published on Boston Magazine's website, a street shot of a woman waiting for the bus in the rain that I was genuinely proud of. Megan replied, "Cool," in the group chat. One word. My dad didn't reply at all. I stopped expecting them to see me, and I started seeing myself. 6 months before the anniversary dinner, Megan got promoted to senior manager. My dad threw a party at the Brookline house. Catered hors d'oeuvres, a sheet cake from a bakery in Coolidge Corner with "Congratulations, Megan" in blue frosting, and a toast where Gerald called her the pride of this family. Patricia cried. Cousins clapped. Megan gave a little speech about hard work paying off, and Bradley stood behind her looking appropriately proud. That same month, Boston Magazine Online published my photograph, a street portrait. A janitor at South Station mopping the floor at 4 a.m, his reflection rippling across the wet tile. The editor emailed me personally to say it was the strongest submission they'd received that quarter. I screenshot the email and sent it to the family group chat with a link to the published piece. Megan. Cool. My mom. A heart emoji. My dad. Nothing. No one brought it up at dinner. No cake. No toast. No pride of this family. And I realized the pattern had always been there. I'd just finally stopped lying to myself about it. Megan's milestones were family events. Mine were background noise. Her promotion meant a party. My published photograph meant a single emoji from a woman who'd never once asked what I was shooting. That was the month I stopped sharing my work with the Dixons entirely. I uploaded to my portfolio site instead. I posted on photography forums. I got feedback from strangers who had no reason to be kind and were kind anyway. Genuinely, specifically kind. I didn't stop out of anger. I stopped because I realized I'd been asking the wrong people for something they didn't know how to give. 3 weeks before the dinner, my dad dropped the announcement in the family group chat. 35th anniversary celebration. A private dining room at Soralina in Back Bay. Prix-fixe menu, $85 a head. 30 guests, extended family plus a few of Gerald and Patricia's oldest friends. Guess who organized it? My mom called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Wendy, sweetie, you're so good at these things. Could you handle the reservation and the flowers and the seating chart? I do it myself, but you know how your father gets about details." So I spent 2 weeks on the phone with the restaurant, coordinating dietary restrictions, confirming RSVPs, ordering white peonies for the centerpieces because Patricia said they reminded her of her wedding bouquet. I designed a seating chart that kept Uncle Robert away from Aunt Linda. They hadn't spoken since a Thanksgiving argument in 2019, and made sure Gerald's college roommate Dave was close enough to reminisce with, but far enough from the kids' table. Megan's contribution was a Hallmark card. The night of the dinner, I put on a navy midi dress I'd bought on sale at Nordstrom Rack. I rarely spent money on clothes for myself. Most months, after rent and student loan payments and gas for the Newton drives, there wasn't much left. But it was a nice dress, and I wanted to feel like I belonged at the table I'd built. I parked 2 blocks away because the lot was full. Walked in past the host stand, into the private room with its white linen tablecloths and flickering votives. 30 familiar faces, all smiling. My dad in a navy sport coat. My mom in pearls. Champagne already poured. I sat down at the end of the table, near the kitchen door as always, and I had no idea it would be the last time. Halfway through dinner, between the risotto and the branzino, my father stood up. He lifted his champagne glass, Veuve Clicquot, because Gerald Dixon did not do anything halfway when people were watching, and tapped it with a butter knife. The room went quiet. "Patricia and I have an announcement," he said. He looked around the table with the satisfied expression of a man who believed he'd earned every good thing in his life. "To celebrate 35 years of marriage, we are taking the entire family to Maui next week. We've booked a villa on the beach, 7 days, all of us." The room erupted. Megan grabbed Bradley's arm. Uncle Robert pumped his fist. Cousins cheered. My mom pressed her hand to her chest and pretended to be surprised, though I'd organized the flowers and knew she couldn't act. I smiled. My chest loosened. For a moment, just a moment, I felt included. "That sounds incredible, Dad," I said. "What time is the departure?" The table was still buzzing, but my dad heard me, and something shifted in his face. A flicker of, what? Annoyance? Confusion? Like I'd asked a question he hadn't prepared an answer for. "Oh, Wendy." He said my name the way you'd say a footnote. "You don't know the time because you're not coming. Someone needs to stay behind and take care of all the kids." The room didn't go silent all at once. It happened in layers. The cousins near him first, then the middle of the table, then the far end where I sat. 30 people, all looking at me. And my father added, as if clarifying a line item on a spreadsheet, "Someone has to be responsible. And let's be honest, you don't have anything going on that can't wait." I looked around the table. I did it slowly, the way you scan a room when you're hoping to find one face that disagrees with what just happened. My mom stared at her plate. She adjusted her pearl necklace with one hand, a nervous tick I'd watched my whole life. She didn't look up. Megan avoided my eyes entirely. Bradley pulled out his phone and studied it like there was something urgent on the screen. Uncle Robert nodded along, muttering something about "makes sense." Cousin Derek shrugged and reached for the bread. Aunt Linda, my mom's younger sister, the only person in the family who'd ever said anything close to "maybe we're being unfair to Wendy," furrowed her brow. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Not yet. It was Megan who finally broke the silence. "It makes sense, Wendy," she said, in the bright, reasonable voice she used for client presentations. "You're the most available, and the kids love you. The kids love you." 4 words that repackaged labor as a privilege, as if being assigned to childcare was a compliment. "We'll FaceTime you from the beach," she added, and a few cousins laughed, relieved, grateful for the tension break. My mom leaned toward me and whispered, "Wendy, please, don't make this about you. It's our night." Their night. The night I'd organized. I looked down at my hands. These hands had called the restaurant, arranged every peony on every table, printed the seating chart, confirmed 30 RSVPs. I'd built this evening from scratch, and I wasn't even seated at it. I was stationed near the kitchen door, and now I was being told to stay behind while everyone else flew to paradise. I wasn't being excluded. I was being classified. I was staff. I set down the champagne glass. I hadn't taken a single sip. 3 seconds of silence. I counted them in my head. 1. To let the room feel the weight. 2. To make sure my voice would come out steady. 3. To decide that I was done. So let me understand this, I said. My voice was calm, conversational almost. I organized this dinner tonight. The reservation, the flowers, the seating chart. And your definition of the entire family going to Maui doesn't include the person who made tonight happen. My dad shifted his weight. Wendy, this isn't the time. No, Dad. I think this is exactly the time. I looked at him directly, not with rage, with clarity. Because for 7 years, every time this family needed something, every Saturday babysitting, every holiday setup, every birthday party, every event I planned while someone else took credit, I was family enough to do the work. But apparently, I'm not family enough to go on the trip. Nobody spoke. Aunt Linda's hand was over her mouth. Megan stared at the tablecloth. Uncle Robert's fork was frozen halfway to his mouth. I stood up, smoothed my dress, folded my linen napkin, neatly, deliberately, and placed it beside my untouched plate. I won't be staying behind to watch the kids, I said. And I think you should start looking into what childcare costs in Boston these days. It runs about $30 an hour. I picked up my purse and walked out. Past the votives, past the peonies I'd ordered, past 30 faces that watched me leave and didn't say a word. In the parking lot, I sat in my Civic and cried. Not because I was sad, because something had cracked open, and all the weight behind it came rushing out at once. I turned off my phone before I pulled out of the parking lot, drove back to Alston in silence. No radio, no podcast, just the hum of tires on the Mass Pike. My studio apartment was dark and small and exactly the right size for what I was feeling. I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling and replayed every word until the words lost their edges. The next morning, I powered on my phone. 14 missed calls, 6 from Patricia, 4 from Megan, 2 from Aunt Linda, 2 from cousins, 0 from my father. The group chat was afire. Patricia: Wendy, that was completely out of line. You humiliated your father in front of the entire family. Megan: Real mature, Wendy. Way to make everything about yourself on their anniversary. Uncle Robert: Kids these days have no sense of respect. Cousin Derek: Yikes! I scrolled through without responding. Then I checked my private messages. One from Aunt Linda: I'm not saying they were right, Wendy. Your dad went too far. Just don't do anything you'll regret. And from my father, nothing. No call, no text, no voicemail. Gerald Dixon hadn't even been bothered enough to be angry. That was the part that landed hardest. He wasn't furious. He was indifferent. I wasn't a daughter who'd embarrassed him. I was a scheduling inconvenience. I put the phone down, opened my laptop, and there, buried under 6 weeks of emails I'd been too afraid to deal with, was the message I'd received 3 weeks before the dinner, the one I'd read 17 times without replying. The subject line said, Invitation, New Perspectives, Group Exhibition, Voss Contemporary, San Francisco. It was from a woman named Elena Voss, and it was going to change my life. I sat with my laptop that night and did something I'd never done before. I did the math. 7 years, 52 Saturdays a year, minus holidays I'd missed because I was running those events instead. Call it 48 Saturdays, 8 hours each. That's 384 hours a year. Times 7 years, roughly 2,700 hours of babysitting. At $30 an hour, the going rate for experienced childcare in the Boston metro area, that came to about $87,000. $87,000 of unpaid labor. And that didn't count the Thanksgivings, the Christmases, the birthday parties, the retirement dinner, the anniversary I'd just organized and been uninvited from attending as a guest. I closed the calculator app and looked around my apartment. The cracked rearview mirror I hadn't fixed, the radiator clanking, the student loan statements on the kitchen counter, loans I was still paying because, contrary to what Uncle Robert claimed, my parents had not paid for my college. I'd gotten a 60% scholarship to UMass Amherst and covered the rest myself, $87,000. And my reward was a chair near the kitchen door and a sentence that still rang in my ears. You're not part of us. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger implies surprise. I was done. That email from Elena Voss, the one I'd been too afraid to answer because some part of me believed my family when they said photography was a hobby. I opened it again. Read it one more time. A gallery owner in San Francisco had looked at my work and seen something worth showing. A stranger had given me more professional respect in one email than my family had offered in 29 years. I started planning, not to get revenge, to get out. $87,000. That's the number I calculated sitting on my bed that night. 7 years of free babysitting, free event planning, free labor, and my reward was getting cut from the family vacation. If you're watching this, and you've ever tried to add up what you've given to people who never once said thank you, drop a comment. You don't have to explain. Just type the number of years you carried that weight. I'll read every single one. The pressure started within 24 hours and didn't let up. Day 1. Patricia called twice. Her strategy was a cocktail of guilt and revisionism. Your father didn't mean it that way, sweetheart. You know how he gets at parties? He was just thinking out loud. As if publicly excluding your daughter in front of 30 relatives was a slip of the tongue. Day 2. Megan texted. Long paragraphs, no line breaks, the literary equivalent of someone talking at you without breathing. Wendy, I really need you to watch the kids while we're in Hawaii. I can't cancel. Bradley already took PTO. If you don't do this, the whole trip falls apart, and that's going to be on you. She added a second message. Olivia cried when I told her Aunt Wendy might not be there this Saturday. Weaponizing a 7-year-old. Classic Megan. Day 3. Uncle Robert called. Your parents paid for your college, you know. The least you can do is pitch in. I almost corrected him. I'd funded my own education through a scholarship and loans I was still paying off at 29. But I didn't. There was no point arguing with a man who'd built his opinion on a fiction and decorated it with certainty. I didn't respond to any of them. Not Patricia's voicemails, not Megan's walls of text, not Robert's lecture. I went to work, came home, edited photographs on my laptop in the blue light of my apartment. They interpreted my silence as a tantrum, a sulk, a phase. They didn't realize it was a strategy. On the 4th day, my father called. Gerald Dixon did not make phone calls lightly. He was a man who believed that most problems resolved themselves if you ignored them long enough, and the fact that he'd picked up his phone meant the problem had become inconvenient. His tone was flat, businesslike, the same voice he'd used for 30 years of regional sales meetings. Wendy, I don't know what this little tantrum is about, but you need to get over it. We leave Saturday. The kids will be dropped off at your apartment Friday night. Megan will leave you a list of their routines. I'm not watching the kids, Dad. A pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone genuinely can't process what they've just heard. Excuse me? I said no. Wendy, you told me I'm not part of this family. I'm taking you at your word. He exhaled, long, controlled. Don't be dramatic. I said that because the trip was planned for couples and your mother. You don't have a partner. It's logistics, not personal. Logistics. He'd reduced me to a line item, an available resource with no dependencies, no commitments, no life that mattered enough to factor in. Then hire a logistics solution, Dad. They run about $30 an hour. He hung up. I sat there in my apartment holding the phone and realized something. Gerald Dixon had called me for the first time in months. Not to apologize, not to check in, not to ask how I was doing. He'd called to confirm a service booking, and I'd just declined the reservation. That night, I sat on my bed and opened Elena Voss's email again. I'd received it 3 weeks before the anniversary dinner. I'd read it at least 20 times, and every time, I'd closed my laptop without replying. because some stubborn, beaten-down part of me still believed the voice that said photography wasn't real. The email was straightforward. Elena Voss, owner of Voss Contemporary in San Francisco's Mission District, was curating a group show called New Perspectives. 6 emerging artists, each with a dedicated wall for 8 to 10 pieces. The gallery would cover printing and framing costs. The show would run for 4 weeks. She'd seen my portfolio online, my Invisible Hours series, black and white street photographs of workers people walk past every day, and she wanted me in. I picked up my phone and called Marcus Reeves. Marcus was my mentor. I'd met him 18 months ago at a weekend workshop at a community art center in Cambridge. He was a professional fine art photographer with work in galleries across New England, and for reasons I still didn't fully understand, he'd taken an interest in mine. He'd been the one to send my portfolio to Elena. "Is this real?" I asked him. "It's real, Wendy. I told Elena about your series. She looked at it and called me the same day. This is your shot." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. The radiator clanked. A siren wailed somewhere on Brighton Avenue. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and typed, "Dear Ms. Voss, I would be honored to participate in New Perspectives. I will have the prints ready within the timeline discussed. Thank you for this opportunity." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The screen glowed in my dark apartment, the only light in the room, and the only light I needed. Saturday morning. The family was supposed to fly to Maui at 2 o'clock. At 8:45 a.m., Megan's white Audi pulled up outside my building. I watched from my window as she unloaded 3 car seats worth of children, 2 suitcases of kid supplies, and a laminated 3-page document, typed, color-coded, detailing each child's routine, allergies, screen time limits, and preferred bedtime songs. She buzzed my apartment. I didn't open the door. My phone lit up. Megan calling. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. "I told Dad I'm not watching the kids. I meant it." "Are you kidding me?" Megan's voice pitched upward. "We're leaving in 3 hours. The kids are standing on your sidewalk, Wendy." "Then you have 3 hours to find a sitter. I'd recommend care.com. Plenty of qualified people." You can't, Wendy. This is insane." I hung up. What followed was 20 minutes of panicked phone calls that I could reconstruct later from the family group chat. Megan called Patricia. Patricia called Gerald. Gerald called me. I declined. Megan called 3 friends who all had Saturday plans. Bradley searched care.com from his phone with one hand while holding Lily in the other. Finally, at 11:30, an emergency babysitter arrived at Megan's Newton house. $45 an hour, rush rate. The family flew to Hawaii at 2 o'clock. Before boarding, Gerald sent me a single text. "We will discuss this when I get back." I read it once. Then I set down my phone, looked around my apartment, and started pulling boxes out of the closet. It was 3 in the afternoon. They were somewhere over Pennsylvania, and I was packing. I made a list. I'm good at lists. 7 years of organizing other people's lives will do that to you. Lease, month to month. Technically required 30 days notice, but my landlord agreed to let me go early if I paid an extra half month. Done. Furniture, not much to deal with. A bed frame from IKEA, a bookshelf, a kitchen table that doubled as a desk. I posted everything on Facebook Marketplace for $100 total. A college kid from BU picked it all up by Wednesday. 4 cardboard boxes, 2 suitcases. That was the entirety of my physical life in Boston. It fit in the back of my Civic with room to spare, which either said something about how light I'd traveled or how little I'd accumulated. I checked my savings account, $14,200. 2 years of freelance photography, product shots for Etsy stores, menu photos for restaurants, headshots, event work. Every dollar earned on my own. Enough for a one-way flight to San Francisco, a security deposit, 2 months' rent on a small apartment in Oakland, and about 3 months of careful living after that. I called Marcus. "I'm coming to California. I told him. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "About damn time, Wendy. I'll send you some contacts out there." I emailed my resignation to the insurance brokerage. 2 weeks' notice, though my manager let me leave early. "You seem like you have somewhere to be," she said. The hardest part was packing the family photo album, a cloth-bound book, faded blue, full of pictures from when Megan and I were small, matching Easter dresses, beach vacations, my dad holding me on his shoulders. I stood in the empty apartment turning pages, and then I put it in the box. I wasn't leaving my family behind. I was leaving the role they'd assigned me. While I packed boxes in Alston, the Dixons were having the time of their lives. Megan posted on Instagram, a family portrait on a Maui beach at sunset, everybody in matching white linen outfits, Gerald with his arm around Patricia, Megan and Bradley flanking them, the kids arranged in front like catalog models. Caption, 35 years of love, #family, first #bless Dixons, 230 likes. Cousin Derek commented, "Goals," with a heart eyes emoji. Gerald's college roommate Dave wrote, "Beautiful family." One person commented, "Where's Wendy?" That was Aunt Linda. Megan replied, "She couldn't make it." Crying smile emoji, minimized, distorted, as if I'd had a scheduling conflict rather than been told I wasn't part of the family. I stared at that photo for a long time, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, studied every face, and then I realized something that should have hit harder than it did. Nobody else had noticed I was missing. Not the cousins, not the family friends, not a single one of the 230 people who'd liked the post. Aunt Linda was the only one. I closed Instagram, opened my portfolio folder. That week, while they surfed and drank Mai Tais, I spent every night editing the final prints for Invisible Hours. 10 photographs, 10 invisible workers, a janitor, a line cook, a delivery driver in snow, a seamstress bent over a machine at midnight. People who built the world other people enjoyed and never got thanked for it. I also had my first video call with Elena Voss. She was direct, warm, precise. "Your photographs make invisible people visible, Wendy," she said. "That tells me something about who you are." I thanked her and closed the laptop and stared at the wall where my prints used to hang. Bare plaster, nail holes. Soon, they'd be on a gallery wall instead. The family came back from Hawaii on a Sunday, tanned, relaxed, and apparently convinced that a week of beach sunsets had resolved everything. Monday morning, Megan called me. She didn't open with "I'm sorry" or "How are you?" She opened with scheduling. "So I'm back, and Saturday's coming up? 9 o'clock work for you?" I almost laughed. A week in Maui, and Megan's first instinct was to book her free babysitter for the next shift. "Let me check," I said, stalling. I needed a few more days. My landlord was finalizing the early termination paperwork, and I hadn't shipped my boxes yet. While we were talking, my phone buzzed, Marcus calling on the other line. I put Megan on hold for 3 seconds, just long enough to hear Marcus say, "Wendy, deadline for the prints is 6 weeks. Elena wants the files by..." Before I switched back. "Who was that?" Megan asked. "Nobody, just a freelance thing." "What prints?" I paused a half beat too long. "Just a project I'm working on." Megan's voice shifted into the dismissive register I'd memorized over 33 years of sisterhood. "Oh, your little photo thing. Anyway, Saturday at 9, right?" Your little photo thing. She'd said it casually, the way you'd refer to a child's macaroni art. She'd heard prints and deadline and instantly filed them under things that didn't matter. "I'll let you know," I said. "What do you mean you'll let me know? You always..." "I said I'll let you know, Megan." She huffed and hung up. I sat in my half-empty apartment and looked at the shipping labels I'd printed that morning. 4 boxes, addressed to an apartment in the Temescal neighborhood of Oakland, California. USPS priority mail, 5 to 7 business days. By Saturday, I'd be on a plane. That week was the most focused I'd ever been. Monday, signed the lease on a studio apartment in Temescal, Oakland. 450 square feet, hardwood floors, a big window facing the street. $2,100 a month, move-in ready. I'd found it on Zillow 2 weeks earlier and done the video walkthrough over FaceTime with the landlord. It wasn't glamorous. It was mine. Tuesday, booked a one-way JetBlue ticket from Boston to San Francisco, $280. Departure, Friday at 7 a.m. Wednesday, shipped my 4 boxes via USPS Priority. The woman at the post office looked at the labels and said, "Oakland? Long move." I said, "Overdue move." Thursday evening, I called Aunt Linda. She was the only person I told. Linda had always been different from Patricia, quieter, sharper, more willing to say uncomfortable things at family dinners. She'd once told Patricia in front of everyone, "You lean on Wendy too much." Patricia hadn't spoken to her for 2 weeks. "Wendy, are you sure about this?" Linda asked. "I've never been more sure." A long breath on the other end. "Then go, and don't look back." She promised not to tell Patricia until I'd landed safely in California. That night, I sat on the floor of my nearly empty apartment and hand-wrote a letter on cream stationery I'd bought at a paper shop in Harvard Square. I addressed it to the Brookline house, calculated the mailing time so it would arrive Friday, the same day I'd be in the air. "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm moving to California to pursue my photography career. This is not a negotiation. I love you, but I can no longer be what you need me to be while losing who I am. Wendy." I sealed it, stamped it, and dropped it in the mailbox on the corner. The slot clanged shut. It was done. My last Saturday in Boston was cold and bright. October light, sharp angles, the kind of weather that makes every building look like a photograph. I spent the morning walking. No agenda, no schedule, no one texting me to ask where I was. I drank coffee at the cafe on the corner of Brighton Avenue, where I'd spent 100 evenings editing photos. The barista said, "See you Monday?" And I said, "Maybe." I drove through Brookline in the afternoon, past the house on the tree-lined street, the Colonial with its white clapboards and the wraparound porch where I'd sat as a kid, reading library books while Megan played soccer in the yard. The kitchen light was on. I could see Patricia's silhouette moving behind the window, loading the dishwasher probably. A task I'd done 1,000 times in that kitchen. I didn't stop. I drove to Newton, parked across the street from Megan's house. Through the open living room window, I heard Olivia laughing, Jack shouting something about dinosaurs, Lily shrieking the way 3-year-olds do when they're overtired and delighted at the same time. That was the hard part, not leaving Gerald and Patricia, not walking away from Megan, leaving those 3 kids who I'd held as infants, who called me Aunt Wendy before they could say most other words, who thought I showed up every Saturday because I wanted to, and I did want to. I loved them, but love shouldn't cost you your entire life. I drove back to Alston. My apartment was bare. No furniture, no pictures on the walls, just my sleeping bag on the floor and my Canon Rebel T6 in its case, packed carefully in my carry-on. Tomorrow morning, while Megan texted to confirm the 9 o'clock drop-off, I'd be checking in at Logan Airport. 6 a.m. Friday. Logan Airport, Terminal C. JetBlue counter. 1 carry-on, 1 checked bag, a boarding pass to San Francisco International, and a feeling in my chest like standing at the edge of a cliff with your eyes open. I sat at the gate with a bad coffee and watched planes taxi through the gray morning. My phone was on. I didn't turn it off. I just watched it. 8:47 a.m. Megan texted. Running 10 minutes late, dropping kids at 9:10. Cool? I didn't reply. The boarding announcement came on. 9:15 a.m. Megan called. I watched it ring. Then she called again. And again. 9:30 a.m. I was in my seat, 14A, window. My phone lit up with a text from Megan to the family group chat. Wendy isn't answering and she's not home. Her apartment looks empty, like actually empty. A cascade of question marks and exclamation points from cousins. Patricia calling me, declined. Gerald calling me, declined. At 9:52, the flight attendant asked me to switch to airplane mode. I did. And for 6 hours, 30,000 feet above the country, I was unreachable. No group chat, no voicemails, no one asking me to babysit or organize or clean up or disappear. On the ground in Brookline, at approximately 10 o'clock, Patricia walked to the mailbox. She found a cream-colored envelope, handwritten, with my return address. She opened it in the kitchen, read it twice, and then read it aloud to Gerald, who was sitting at the head of the dining table. His response, according to Aunt Linda, who heard about it later, "She'll be back in a week." At 1 o'clock Pacific time, I landed in San Francisco. 68 degrees, blue sky, the bay glittering through the terminal windows. No one called to ask where I was going, so I went. The apartment in Temescal was smaller than I'd expected, and better than I deserved. Hardwood floors worn smooth by decades of tenants, a window that faced the street, where a magnolia tree shaded the sidewalk. No furniture, no curtains, just my 4 boxes stacked against the wall, delivered by USPS 2 days earlier, and the 2 bags I'd carried from the airport. I unpacked that first evening with the deliberate focus of someone building a new life from raw materials. Laptop on the floor, hard drive full of photographs, Canon in its case, placed carefully on the windowsill, a few clothes in the closet. Everything else could wait. I called Elena Voss and told her I'd arrived. She invited me to see the gallery space the next day. "I think you'll like it," she said. "It has good bones." That night, I sat on the floor of my empty apartment and ate pho from a Vietnamese place on Telegraph Avenue. The broth was perfect, rich, clean, a little sweet. I ate it cross-legged with my back against the wall, listening to the street noise, a dog barking, someone's car stereo, the distant grumble of Bart. I checked my phone for the first time since landing. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages. Patricia's voicemails were increasingly desperate, crying, then angry, then crying again. Megan's texts alternated between fury and disbelief. Gerald had sent exactly one message: "This is extremely selfish." Cousin Derek: "Bro, what's happening?" Aunt Linda, in a private message: "You made it?" Followed by a red heart. I typed back 2 words: "I'm here." Then I turned off my phone, set down my chopsticks, and looked out the window at a street I didn't recognize, in a city where nobody knew my name. It was the best meal I'd had in 7 years. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, and only one person asked, "You made it?" instead of, "How could you do this to us?" If you understand the difference between those 2 questions, if you know what it feels like when someone finally cares about where you're going instead of being angry that you left, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the right story at the right moment changes a decision, and sometimes a red heart emoji from one person outweighs 47 messages from everyone else. 6 weeks in Oakland. I found a rhythm I didn't know I was capable of. Mornings. I shot. The light in the East Bay was nothing like Boston. Warmer, softer, almost golden even in November. I walked through Temescal, through the Fruitvale, down to the waterfront, and I photographed everything. Afternoons, I worked. I'd picked up a part-time gig shooting food photography for a restaurant group in San Francisco. $600 a week, enough to cover rent and keep me fed. The creative director said I had a weird thing with natural light. I took that as a compliment. Evenings, I prepared for the show. Voss Contemporary was a compact gallery in the Mission District. Exposed brick walls, concrete floors polished to a shine, track lighting that Elena adjusted by hand. My section was one long wall on the east side of the building. Space for 10 pieces. 10 windows into the lives of people the world had decided didn't need to be seen. Marcus flew out from Boston to help me hang the prints. He walked along the wall, studying each photograph, and stopped in front of 3 a.m. Terminal B, my janitor at South Station, reflected in a wet floor she'd just mopped. "These are better than the ones I showed Elena," he said. "You've gotten sharper." Elena approved the final arrangement, and handed me a stack of invitation cards. Heavy cardstock, letterpress print. I turned one over in my hand. Wendy Dixon, Invisible Hours, Voss Contemporary, San Francisco. My name on thick paper in clean black type. It was the first time my name had appeared on something that wasn't a babysitting schedule or a grocery list. I mailed one card to Aunt Linda. I didn't send one to anyone else in the family. Back in Brookline, reality had arrived. 5 weeks without Wendy, and the Dixon household was starting to feel the absence, not of a daughter, but of an infrastructure. Megan's new normal, a babysitter booked through care.com, $30 an hour, 8 hours every Saturday, $960 a month. By week 3, she was on the phone with Patricia, voice tight. "This is insane, Mom. We're spending more on childcare than our car payment. Wendy did this for free." Patricia, meanwhile, had attempted to organize Olivia's 7th birthday party on her own. It did not go well. She ordered the wrong cake flavor, vanilla instead of strawberry. The Dollar Tree decorations arrived late. She'd sent the invitations a week behind schedule, so half the kids' parents never RSVP'd. The party was thin and sad and nothing like the ones Wendy had run for 6 years. Olivia sat at the kitchen table afterward, picking at a slice of wrong-flavored cake, and said, "Aunt Wendy always makes my birthday special." Patricia's face went still. She opened her mouth, closed it, and left the room. Gerald was harder to read, but the signs were there. He watched more television, talked less at Sunday dinners. The gatherings themselves had shrunk, 2 empty chairs at the table now. Wendy's, obviously, and Aunt Linda's. Linda had stopped attending after a sharp phone call with Patricia in which she'd said, "You can't be surprised she left when you treated her like the help." Patricia hung up on her. The house in Brookline still looked the same from the outside. White clapboards, wraparound porch, leaves turning in the yard. But inside, the gears that had kept everything running were grinding, and the person who'd oiled them was 2,600 miles away, eating pho on the floor of an apartment nobody had her address to. 5 weeks after I moved, my mother called. I answered for the first time since leaving. She started crying before she said hello. "Wendy, this family is falling apart without you." I was sitting in my apartment in Oakland, a cup of tea on the windowsill, the evening light gold and long. I let her cry for a few seconds. Then I said, "The family isn't falling apart, Mom. You're just doing my share of the work now." "That's not fair. We loved having you around." "You loved having me available. There's a difference." Silence. I could hear her breathing, the faint sound of the kitchen faucet she never fully closed. "Your father barely eats," she said, shifting tactics. "Olivia asks about you every day. She drew you a picture of a camera last week. Do you know how that makes me feel?" "I miss the kids too, Mom, but I'm not coming back to be the family babysitter. If you want me to visit, it'll be as a guest, not as staff." "When did you become so hard?" I looked out the window. A woman was walking a golden retriever on the sidewalk below, and the dog was pulling toward the magnolia tree. "I didn't become hard. I became honest." More silence. The kind that fills with all the things a person can't bring themselves to say. "I have to go, Mom. I have work in the morning." "What kind of work?" "Photography, the kind that pays." She hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and realized my hands were steady. No shaking, no guilt spiral, just a calm I'd never felt while talking to my mother. 2 days later, the gallery opened. The morning of the opening, I was at the gallery by 8. I checked the lighting 3 times, adjusted a frame that was off by a 1/4 inch, reread the artist's statement I'd written and taped to the wall beside my section. Invisible Hours captures the people who sustain the visible world, the workers we walk past, the labor we rely on and rarely acknowledge. This series is an act of seeing. Elena found me standing in front of my wall, arms crossed, chewing my thumbnail. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," she smiled. "Good. That means it matters to you. I went home and changed. Black thrifted blazer, tailored black pants, flat shoes, professional, clean. A far cry from the Nordstrom Rack dress I'd worn to the anniversary dinner. A night when I'd dressed up to be invisible, and tonight, when I'd dressed simply to be seen. Marcus arrived at 4. He hugged me in the gallery doorway and held on for a second longer than usual. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, "you're already here. That's the win." I walked the length of my wall one more time. 10 photographs. 10 people caught in the act of being overlooked. The janitor, the line cook, the delivery driver, the seamstress. Each of them doing work that mattered in spaces where no one was watching. And I realized, slowly, standing in that gallery with the track lights warm above me, that I'd spent 2 years photographing my own life. Every invisible worker in those frames was a version of the woman I'd been in Brookline. Essential, unacknowledged, seen only when something needed doing. 6 p.m. Elena dimmed the overheads, opened the doors. The Mission District evening air drifted in, cool, electric, smelling faintly of jasmine from the planter boxes next door. The room began to fill. By 7 o'clock, over 40 people had passed through the gallery. Art collectors in quiet linen, students with tote bags, a woman from the SF Chronicles Arts blog with a recorder and a notebook, other artists from the show, gallery regulars who came to every Voss Contemporary opening and knew Elena by name. They gathered in front of my wall. I watched from the corner, gripping a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, as strangers stood before my photographs and stopped. Actually stopped. Not the polite, drifting pause you give to something you're supposed to admire. The real kind. The kind where someone's weight shifts, and their head tilts, and they lean in because they've seen something that caught them. The photograph that held people longest was 3 a.m. Terminal B. The janitor. The wet floor. Her reflection rippling beneath her like a ghost made of labor. 3 people stood in front of it at the same time, not speaking. A collector, silver-haired, cashmere scarf, the kind of man who looked like he owned things, asked Elena about pricing on 3 pieces. Elena nodded once and said, "We'll discuss," which I'd learned was gallery language for "he's buying." The Chronicle blogger pulled me aside. "Your series, The Invisible Workers, what inspired it?" I thought about Brookline, about the kitchen door, about peonies I'd arranged for a dinner I wasn't invited to enjoy. "I spent years being the invisible person in my own family," I said. "I wanted to show that invisible doesn't mean insignificant." She wrote it down. Before the night ended, 2 red-soled dots appeared beside 2 of my photographs, $1,200 each, and Elena, standing beside me as the last guests filtered out, said quietly, "For a first show, Wendy, this is exceptional." 2 days after the opening, the SF Chronicle Arts blog published its review. New Perspectives at Voss Contemporary, 6 Emerging Artists You Should Know. There was a photograph of me standing beside 3 a.m. Terminal B, arms crossed, looking at my own work. And the quote, "Invisible doesn't mean insignificant." Elena shared the article on Instagram and tagged my account. Marcus reposted it. A few photographers I'd met at the opening shared it in their stories. The article rippled outward through the small, interconnected world of Bay Area art. Not viral, not explosive, but steady and real. It reached Brookline 3 days later through the most predictable channel possible. Cousin Derek, who spent more time on social media than anyone in the family, saw it because Aunt Linda had liked the post. He screenshot the article and dropped it into the family group chat with a single message. Guys, is this our Wendy? In a San Francisco gallery?" 3 minutes of silence. Then Megan. "What is this?" Patricia. "She's in San Francisco?" Gerald. "Nothing." He read the messages. The blue check marks confirmed it, but he didn't type a word. I know all of this because Aunt Linda sent me screenshots. I opened them on my phone while sitting in a coffee shop on College Avenue, eating a croissant, and I studied each message the way you'd study a photograph. looking for the detail that told the real story. Megan clicked through the gallery website. She saw my name on the wall. She saw the sold dots. She saw the prices, $1,200 to $1,800 per piece. She saw the Chronicle quote. And somewhere in Newton, Massachusetts, a woman who'd once called my work "your little photo thing" was scrolling through evidence that she'd been wrong. She didn't comment in the group chat. Neither did Gerald. Gerald called 2 days later. I was walking along the Oakland waterfront, the Bay Bridge in the distance, gulls wheeling overhead. I saw Dad on the screen and almost let it ring. Then I answered. His voice was different. Not the flat, business-like tone from the babysitting call. Not the patriarch voice from the anniversary dinner. Something smaller, uncertain. I saw the article, he said. Your mother showed me. I waited. That's good work, Wendy. 5 words. The first professional compliment my father had given me in 29 years. It should have meant everything. Instead, it arrived like a letter postmarked months too late. The gesture was real, but the timing emptied it. Thank you, I said. So, when are you coming home? I am home, Dad. You know what I mean. Back to Boston. Back to the family. I stopped walking, watched a ferry cross the bay, small and steady against the water. I was always part of the family, Dad. You're the one who said I wasn't. I didn't. I was talking about the trip, the logistics. You were talking about my place, and I heard you clearly, so I found a new one. He didn't respond. I listened to him breathe, the same measured exhale he'd used during the phone call about the babysitting, except this time it carried something heavier. Confusion, maybe, or the first faint outline of regret. I'm not angry, I said, but I'm also not coming back to sit by the kitchen door. If you want a relationship, you know where I am, as a daughter, not as a service. I hung up, gently, without slamming anything, and I kept walking along the water, into the afternoon, into a city that had already given me more respect than the house I grew up in. Megan called the next day. She opened with offense, which was her default when she felt exposed. You moved across the country and didn't even tell us? What kind of sister does that? The kind who got tired of being your unpaid nanny, Megan. Oh, come on. That is so dramatic. We're family. Families help each other. Help goes both ways. Name one time you helped me with something. Anything. Silence. I could hear Jack yelling in the background and Lily crying about something, and I thought, that soundtrack used to be my every Saturday. I can name 60 Saturdays I spent at your house last year, I said. That's over 400 hours of childcare. At the going rate in Boston, that's about $12,000, just in 1 year. You can't put a price on family. Then why did you put a price on a babysitter the second I stopped being free? More silence, the kind that answers a question better than words. I love Olivia, Jack, and Lily, I said. If you want to bring them out to visit, I've got a guest sleeping bag and the best Vietnamese food in the Bay Area. But I'm done being the person who makes your life work, while mine stands still. Megan hung up. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. An email from Elena. All 10 pieces from Invisible Hours had sold. Total gross revenue, $14,600. After the gallery's 50% commission, standard for emerging artists, I'd received $7,300. $7,300 from photographs, from the hobby my family laughed at. I closed the laptop and looked out the window at the magnolia tree on my street, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, which was better. 3 months in Oakland, and I had a life that fit. The restaurant group kept me on for regular shoots. A local nonprofit hired me to document their after-school program. Between those gigs and occasional freelance work, I was pulling in about $3,500 a month. Not wealth, not comfort, but enough to pay rent, eat well, keep the lights on, and save a little. The math was tight, but the math was mine. Elena invited me to do a solo show in 6 months, a new series, shot entirely in California. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I upgraded my camera. Not to the Leica I'd once scrolled past on B&H Photo with a kind of reverent longing. That would come later, or it wouldn't, and either was fine. I bought a Fujifilm X-T5, $1,700, purchased with money from my sold prints. Professional grade, earned. My days had a rhythm now. Shoot in the mornings, edit in the afternoons, explore the city in the evenings. I went to gallery openings and talked to people who asked about my work like it mattered. I made friends, actual friends, people who wanted nothing from me except conversation and the occasional shared meal. Aunt Linda flew out for a weekend. We ate dinner at a Peruvian place in the Mission District, and she told me stories about Patricia that made her seem human again. A young woman who'd married too early, deferred too much, and never learned that loving your children meant seeing them as individuals. Your mother asks about you every week, Linda said over dessert. I know, she can call me, as a mother, not as a dispatcher. Linda smiled, sad, warm, complicated, and changed the subject to the restaurant ceviche, which was, admittedly, outstanding. In Brookline, the consequences continued to compound. Megan still had the babysitter. The monthly cost, $960, had become a permanent line item in the Hale household budget, and Bradley had started asking questions. Why can't your mom help more? Became a recurring argument. Their weekends, once lazy and unstructured thanks to Wendy's free labor, now revolved around logistics and invoices. Megan tried to organize Christmas on her own. She undercooked the turkey. She forgot to buy wrapping paper. The kids opened presents in newspaper, which Olivia thought was fun and Megan thought was humiliating. I had no idea how much Wendy did, she told Bradley on Christmas night, standing in a kitchen full of dirty dishes she didn't know how to delegate. Gerald grew quieter. He spent more time in his recliner, watching football games he didn't care about, paging through magazines he didn't read. One evening in January, Patricia walked into the living room and found him sitting with the old family photo album open on his lap. He was stopped on a page from 1999. Wendy, age 3, holding a toy camera, grinning at the lens. Gerald, Patricia said. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes were red. I made a mistake, he said. 2 words. The hardest 2 words Gerald Dixon had ever spoken. He didn't elaborate, didn't apologize, didn't explain, just sat there with the album on his knees and the weight of the sentence filling the room. Patricia began calling me every Sunday.